Hello, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Jeff Lovejoy. I'm a certified business coach with Action Coach, which is a worldwide business coaching organization. I've been doing this for 12 years, and I work with business owners to help them overcome the challenges that they confront on a daily basis and that often impede the growth and the success of the business. So welcome. Today, we're going to focus on what it takes to run a business successfully in a virtual world. There are three primary areas I really want to look at it. And I'll tell you in advance, a lot of these areas are similar to what should be happening today, but they're compounded. The significance of them is compounded because we're in a virtual world. I don't think I'm going to say things that are necessarily new to you, but I want to impress upon you that these days it's critical, almost imperative, that the leadership of companies follow these advices. So that's one thing. And let's recognize that being in a virtual world is not such a bad thing from a business perspective. And in fact, a lot of businesses had already started moving in that direction even before COVID-19 came along. Sales organizations, a lot of their salespeople are working virtually, and other divisions, other groups within businesses have moved virtually. But that poses some challenges, especially when we're talking about moving the entire office to a virtual world. And that's what COVID has imposed upon us. But let's acknowledge that working virtually, it's lower cost for the owners, little overhead is dropped dramatically. And also there's a feeling that employees get more work done over time. A, because they don't have commutes. B, because the work is where they are. So instead of turning on the tube, maybe they go down and they do a little bit of extra work. So those are two positive things. I know in my case, I have noticed dramatically the amount of time I've saved by not having to drive to meet with individual business owners, which was my normal practice. So there's some good things, but let's also acknowledge that these are things that we're in the process of migrating anyway. Businesses had been moving to a virtual world at a much slower pace, but it was a march that had already begun. COVID has accelerated that dramatically. So while it has some positives and while it presents some challenges, our addressing these things now will make it better for us in the future, because we will have been down the path that we eventually would have gotten to a year, 2, 3, 5 years down the road. We'll be there in the next couple months, in many cases. So while running a business virtually has got a lot of positive things to it, let's also acknowledge that it puts a real strain on the personal aspects of running the business, the employee morale, the employee mindset, and specifically in two areas. Fear is a huge one. The massive impact being felt by employees in a virtual world. What's going on with the business? Am I going to continue to have my job? What's going to happen? I keep reading about all these people laying off and all this unemployment. What's going to happen? I don't know what's going on with the company. I'm here in my cocoon. I don't know how long my job's going to last. Those are not unusual sentiments felt by your employees. Another is loneliness. You know, in a office setting, it's easy to mingle with people and grab a cup of coffee and go sit down with somebody and just talk about what they're working on or what they did last night or whatever. And that when you're working out of the home, as it relates to family members. So loneliness is a big thing that owners have got to acknowledge that's going on with their employees now. And lastly, distractions. You know, the dog comes into the office, and so you pet the dog, or your son comes by and wants to go to lunch, or whatever it is. While these things are good, they do distract you from doing the work. And I have had a conversation yesterday with a business owner who has a fabulous employee but he's noticed since they've been virtual that things have, there's a little bit of the bonding hasn't been as cohesive as it was when they were staring at each other in the office, kind of across the desk from one another. So these things come into play, and they can interfere with employee performance. And you as the owner, you as the managers, have got to acknowledge those and recognize them. You can't just put people in space by themselves and expect them to work as efficiently and as effectively as when they were in the office, unless you do some certain things, and we'll talk about those things, to lessen the impact of the virtual world. Now, the impact isn't felt just by the employees, it's also the owners and the managers, who in the past would see people every day, would talk and would mingle and would hear things, overhear things, and were much more on top of what was going on within the business than they are apt to be in a virtual space. Everybody's head down, they're doing the work, but the owners and the managers have got to be more than that. They've got to be the glue that holds the organization together, and even more so in a virtual world. And we'll go through some of those things. It's all about execution, isn't it? Everything has got to be geared towards producing whatever you produce efficiently, effectively, and according to agreed upon deadlines. If that isn't happening, then you have a problem. And it's more apt to happen when employees are off-site, meaning they're working virtually, because no one is checking on them as often, and no one is seeing what's happening, and that distraction that comes along may interfere with some things that they were supposed to have got done that they just forgot about. So execution is key, and it's one of the key responsibilities of leaders and managers. And so I want to focus on 3 key strategies around the whole idea of execution, those being good technology, good management, and good systems. So in a virtual space, technology is critical, absolutely critical. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we had started to move towards virtual work environments, but from the technology, and it's already started to move from desktop to mobile, but that now has accelerated dramatically. And with it, it presents all kinds of issues. So do your team have the hardware that they need in order to be able to run exactly as they were when they were back in the office, but now in a remote world? What about software? What kind of software do they have? What kind of software do you, the owner, the manager, have? Are you using Microsoft Planner or some type of software like that that allows you to see what's being worked on, by whom, and at what stage of progress they are with specific projects? So you can kind of keep your hands on and your eyes on what's happening in your business just through the use of Microsoft Planner. And there are other software like that. Doesn't have to be Microsoft Planner. It could be other type of collaborative software, collaborative project management software. But think about what you're going to need and your teammates need in order to replicate the dynamic of working in an office. VPNs. Do you have VPNs set up? What sort of operating speeds are you working on in your Wi-Fi in the individual offices? The virtual offices. Do the virtual offices have the bandwidth in order to perform what they were performing in the real world? So lots of things to be thinking about here. And if you're not thinking about them, your execution is going to be suffering. Security is another one. The quote on the top of this slide is very true. These days, hackers are coming out of the woodwork because they know these insecurities. They know people are scared. They know people are worried, and they're more apt to do things that they probably shouldn't do and wouldn't do in more normal times. So your security, you've got to make sure that when all the data that your folks are dealing with remotely is tight, and that there's no risk of it being hacked or there's no risk of it being attacked by hackers. So those are, technology is key. Technology is the enabler that allows your people to do their work. So if you have below standard technology, that's the type of work you're going to get out of your people, especially in a remote environment. Now let's look at management. And I would suggest that you write down this definition. Good management is about building competent and productive people. Two aspects, competent and productive. So when we dig into competent, what are you as the manager or owner doing to make sure that your people are competent in a virtual world? And especially new people you're just bringing. How are you going to onboard a new employee in a virtual world? Something to think about. You know, those people need a lot of your time. You need to be coaching them actively, because your goal needs to be to get them to a fairly high level of competency as quickly as you can. If they're not competent, your execution is suffering. The longer that they're not competent, your execution is suffering. And especially in a virtual world, they can't just go next door and ask somebody how do they do something, because there is no next door. The next door is the next door neighbor who doesn't work for the company. So you've got to be really spending a lot of time with new and people that need extra help, and making sure that you coach them up to competency. A lot of times I find business owners who are more focused on other aspects of the business than building the team and creating the team, an empowered team. And if there's any time that owners need to be focused on the team and empowering the team, it's now in the virtual world. In fact, it's imperative. I'm going to be using that word a lot today. Imperative that owners spend time with their team, and we'll go through some of the things they need to be doing. But, you know, so recognize that you got the employees out in the virtual world, the owner and the managers are in a different space, and anything you can do to bridge that gap is going to be appreciated by the employees, whether it's quick phone calls every morning, whether it's a text messages, hey, just checking in with you, whatever it is you need to do. Think about ways that you can help them overcome that loneliness and the feeling scared. In fact, for the scared, you need to be really conscious about sharing with your employees successes, schedule meetings with them, huddles, and we'll talk about weekly huddles. But in those huddles, it's a great opportunity to share successes, to share where the company is going, to kind of reassure the employees that we're moving forward and my job's going to be okay, as opposed to a business that's stagnant and is going to feel some adverse impact from this whole pandemic thing. So, you know, and as a leader, as a manager, do you have a superhero complex? And by a superhero complex, I mean, you're the one that comes to the rescue when an employee doesn't know how to do things. You're the one that, instead of helping the employee grow and learn how to deal with an issue, you actually get in and do it for them. Well, you know, and the logic typically for that is, well, you know, it would take me 15 minutes to show you how to do it. I can do it in 3 minutes. So, you know, let's just save some time and I'll do it for you. Well, the problem there is the employee hasn't learned anything. And you haven't built competency in that employee relative to that task. So, you know, you might have saved yourself a little bit of time, but in the long run, you've cost yourself. So don't be a superhero, especially now. Get the employees to work their way through issues with your guidance. And we'll talk about what type of questions to ask. There are good management questions to be asking that foster competency, and they're bad questions. And let's look at those. A bad management question always starts with why. Why did you do it that way? Why are you late? Why can't you get this done? Always puts the person that you're talking to on the defensive. And in today's environment where people are frightened they're scared, they're isolated, they're lonely, they're subject to lots of distraction. That's not what you want to be putting members of your team under. You need to be supportive of them. And ways to be supportive of them are asking questions like, what do we need to do to get it done? What do we need to do to get it done in the next 60 minutes? What 3 things do we need to get it done in the next 60 minutes? These are the type of questions that you can start asking employees to get them to think through solutions and how they would fix problems, rather than you getting involved and directly either doing the work or putting them in the defensive, where morale begins to really suffer. Critical in a virtual world that you create a workforce that's working together and is cohesive as much as possible, because when everybody is working in different locations. And it's key to you. You know, if you have a team that's not executing or is not producing, look at yourself as the reason why. You haven't done a good job in building competency, nor have you done a good job in building production. And when I mean production, I want to talk about a management systems. I want to review what Brad Sugars has put in place at Action Coach as a great model for you to look at and to think about. So it's all built around making sure that people understand what everybody else is working on, and that the leaders understand what the team members are working on, which is exactly where you need to be in a virtual world. If things are going to slip through the cracks, it's more apt to happen in a virtual world than in a traditional office space. And so you as the manager, you as the owner, responsible for execution, can't allow those things to slip through the cracks. So you have to be aware of what everybody else is doing to make sure that things are met, deadlines are met, to make sure that things don't slip through the crack, and that there's not redundancy or frustration going on within your organization. Excuse me. So what Brad's introduced in the Action Coach is at the end of each day, team members write down their to-dos for tomorrow, and they handwrite them, because handwriting does something different to the brain, that somehow seems to cause it to remember things more than if you keyboard it. So they write their to-dos down, and then they text it to their boss. So at the end of the day, the boss is getting all of their texts from members of his team telling him or her what they're going to be working on tomorrow. On Fridays, they have to do the Friday text, but they also have to do a text that looks at what they're going to be working on next week. And the reason they do that is because on Monday, there's a team huddle. The team huddle looks at what everybody is going to be working on that week and provides an opportunity for people to kind of outline what they're working on and to engage others that they're going to need their help on in executing that work. All that happens in that Monday huddle meeting. It's where successes get shared. It's where opportunities are identified and acted on. So then the next thing that happens is on Thursdays, we have one-on-one scheduled with each of the team members, where the team member deals with the lion, L-I-O-N. We review what happened last week relative to your goals. What successes did you have? What issues do you want to have come up last week and in the beginning of this week? We don't want those coming up in the Monday meeting. We want them to come up in the Thursday one-on-one meeting where they can be better addressed. Then what opportunities have you identified to help grow the business? Now, this is an interesting one, because a lot of employees, the first couple of times they go through this, don't know what to say here. They haven't really been thinking about opportunities that they can identify that will help the company grow. But by the third, fourth, and fifth weeks, they know that they've got to come to this lion meeting, this Thursday meeting, with an idea or two around opportunities to grow the business. And it's a tremendous source of creative thinking that identifies some great opportunities. And then the end is what's going to happen next week. So this is how we keep management informed of what the employees are working on, what the team members are working on. And team members can hear not just what's happening within the business in this one-on-one, but also in the Monday huddle, the whole teams are together. And there are companies that will have daily huddles. They will have, in some cases, 3 huddles every single day, all with the design purpose of making sure that the employees that are out virtual, who are fearful, who are feeling isolated, begin to feel like they're part of the team again, and that they're not as isolated. Yeah, I'm working virtually, but I know that 1 time, 2 times, 3 times a day, I'm on the phone with my team. That is a great way to start beginning to rebuild the cohesiveness that existed in an office space. All right, now we talked about there being 3 necessary things to ensure a business runs well in a virtual environment. 1 was technology, 2 was the management, both in terms of management style and management system. And the next is systems. And when I say systems here, I don't mean like technology systems. I mean processes. You know, a great example is checklists. Every time I get on an airplane, I walk on the ramp to get on the plane, and as soon as I get on the plane, I look to the left to kind of look into the cockpit. And inevitably, the pilots are there working their way down through a checklist. Why do they have a checklist? Because they want to make absolutely certain there's no problems on that flight between when they take off and when they land. And they don't want to run the risk of forgetting something that is crucial and may impact a bad takeoff or bad landing. So they use checklists every single time. What about you? Do you have checklists in your businesses? Do you have processes that are dependent upon prior event things happening and that would lend themselves ideally to checklists? And you do, and I'll show you some of those processes coming up. But make use of checklists. Document those areas and think about those areas where delivery is inconsistent. Sometimes we do it this way, sometimes we do it that way. Sometimes quality is good, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we arrive on schedule, sometimes we don't. Those are areas ripe for instilling processes. And you see, the importance of processes here is that people run the processes and the processes run the business. And if you don't have strong processes in place in your business in a virtual world, being virtual is going to really have a negative impact on your business. You got to have processes in place to run the business, whether you're in a virtual world or an office space. Excuse me. So you need to get processes in place, and let's talk about, and let's look at some process. You know, video. Video is great for teaching people how to get things done. Videotape it, and every time you have a new employee, anytime someone does something wrong, have them go back and watch the video. Sales scripts for salespeople. You know, not that you're going to read the script, but it gives salespeople the direction to take a conversation, how to handle objections, how to make that initial introductory phone call. What should be said? What shouldn't be said? Da, da, da. It's like actors and actresses. They're not reading scripts, but they're ad-libbing scripts that they've been given. So think about scripting. And in a virtual world, weaknesses will be uncovered if you don't have processes in place. So let's look at some common areas for processes. Sales process, scheduling processes. Sales process meaning first we do this, and then we do this, and then the customer does this, and then we happen this, and this, and this, and this. And it's all done to make sure that when we are at as high a close rate as we possibly can. Scheduling. The purpose is to make sure that when we tell someone that we're going to be there Tuesday at noon, we are there at Tuesday at 11:55, not 12:30, not 1:30, or not next day noon. Communications. What communications do you have in place to regularly communicate with your employees? Not when something pops into your mind, schedule a meeting. Every single week, you need to have meetings. Recruiting and hiring. How do you recruit? How do you hire? And roles and responsibilities. I want to get into those in a minute. Accounts payable. What's your accounts payable process? Are you paying as soon as the bill comes in? Are you taking full advantage of the terms? What are you doing? Critical to have processes in place. So I want to kind of wind down with looking at roles and responsibilities, because if an employee is uncertain as to what their role and responsibility is, it's going to be really heightened in a virtual world. I work with owners, and they tell me that they don't have roles and responsibilities. In fact, I'm working for one now, and her team complains because in some cases they don't know who does what. And so they, in the absence of that, they try to do it. Well, they're not the professional at doing it. They're not the expert. And so it has to be clearly defined, what are my roles and responsibilities, and that needs to be communicated to everybody on the team. And it is especially critical. It's imperative in a virtual world for this to happen. Everybody needs to understand what they're responsible for and what others are responsible for. So what I suggest you do is sit down with an employee, and each of you identify individually, separately, the top 10 things that that position is responsible for doing. And then compare the list. And those areas that are in common are tasks that need to be associated with that job, and they need to be written down and they need to be socialized. Those areas where either you have on your list and the employee doesn't, or vice versa, need to be looked at because they may be needed on that list as well. But it's critical to identify roles and responsibilities in this world of being in virtual space. All right, well, that's all. Those are some strategies that I have found have been helpful to my clients in working in a virtual space. I'd be glad to answer questions. Just give me a call. My number is 404. Well, it's at the bottom of the slides. Or send me an email, jefflovejoy@actioncoach.com. I'd be glad to spend some time talking to you about your business and what's needed in order for it to work effectively in a virtual space. But I want you to make a commitment to me that after this webinar, you're going to sit down and you're going to list 5 ideas that you got out of this webinar that you're going to apply to your business. If you can do that, I will consider this a successful webinar. Thanks so much. All the best to you. And look, let's stay healthy and be positive. We're going to get through this. You as the owner are the most important person in that organization in terms of who people look up to. And if you're not positive and confident and moving ahead, that's going to impact morale dramatically, especially when people are virtual and are already fearful and already feeling isolated. So be positive, be strong, and be healthy. All the best. Bye-bye.